More than a dozen U.S. states are reporting a spike in new coronavirus cases. Several of these states were among the first to lift lockdown restrictions, while others never fully shut down. U.S. coronavirus cases are slowing down overall, with all 50 states now at least partially reopened. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany touted the country's progress Tuesday.
42 states are now under 10% in their positivity rate for the virus. Mortality is now equivalent to what we saw at the end of March. That's the lowest level in 2 months. So we are seeing these encouraging signs as we start to reopen.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is issuing a warning regarding the state of the global pandemic. The agency says this is currently the middle of the first wave of the virus, and countries could face an immediate second peak if restrictions are lifted too soon. Let's bring in Hunter Walker. He's a White House correspondent for Yahoo News. Hunter, good to see you again. A Reuters investigation found that 20 states reported an uptick in cases over the past week. Are there any signs at all that is causing the White House to rethink the timeline for reopening the country?
Well, the White House is really in this odd position where, on the one hand, they're issuing guidelines that, are pretty in line with what experts are advocating, which is sort of a phased reopening. But on the other hand, below the surface, we've seen indications of discord with the CDC, reports that the CDC wanted to issue much more precise and strict guidelines, and the White House threw those out. And then also, everything is politics. And on the political front, much of the president's base is, right-leaning and very caught up in this sort of reopen America movement that you see emerging. And at the same time that the White House has issued these guidelines, it has also, winked and nodded at the very least towards those protesters who are flouting those guidelines. So the same president who you have, sort of issuing a cautious reopening plan is the guy who's tweeting "Liberate Michigan." And so there really are mixed messages that are at odds with each other right now.
So during Tuesday's briefing, Kayleigh McEnany was asked why the president retweeted a post criticizing Joe Biden for wearing a mask at a Memorial Day service. Let's listen.
The president's excited to see that Joe emerged from the basement. It is a bit peculiar, though, that in his basement right next to his wife, he's not wearing a mask, but he's wearing one outdoors when he's socially distant. So I think that there was a discrepancy there. He's not shaming anyone. As the president noted himself, he wore this mask in private at the Ford facility, and he said he's open to it if the circumstance mandates it. It's the personal choice of the individual, but it didn't strike him as a very data-driven decision in that particular incident.
So, Hunter, in some states, wearing a mask is a requirement, but how does the message the White House is sending on wearing personal protective equipment square with the recommendations of the coronavirus task force?
Well, this is a perfect example of what we were just talking about, where the White House messaging seems to be at odds with its own guidelines. The federal guidelines from the president's task force say you should wear a mask and you should wear face coverings when you are outside. The press secretary's comments were odd because no one is saying that you should be wearing masks in your own home with the members of your household that you're isolating or quarantining with. So they took this shot at Joe Biden, but I think, again, it's another one of those examples of how the president and his team are sort of winking and nodding towards those movement conservatives who really want to see the country reopen and for whom wearing a mask is a sign of weakness or a sign that you want to take away people's liberty.
So the Republican National Convention, Hunter, is set to take place in Charlotte, North Carolina in August. President Trump is threatening to move it to another state after Democratic Governor Roy Cooper would not guarantee the event could take place at full capacity. Is the president asking for a guarantee no governor could make at this point?
Well, on his Twitter, the president really, as you said, asked for very aggressive, full guarantee pretty much within 24 hours. The White House has put forth a little bit more of a moderated message since then. It wouldn't be the first time there was cleaning up from the president's Twitter where, they've said they're in communication and they want to know that the convention could go forward. One thing that I found odd about the whole thing was that, 2012, Charlotte, this is where the Democratic convention took place. So, one thing the president was saying was that the Republicans need to do all this work to make the arena up to speed for a convention, but, it's already hosted one fairly recently.
On another topic, New York State has the most COVID-19 cases, but the state has now reported less than 100 deaths for 3 days in a row. And Governor Andrew Cuomo will meet with President Trump on Wednesday. What's on the agenda there?
Well, nominally, the two want to talk about infrastructure. Cuomo is one of these blue state governors who is a little alarmed that they haven't gotten the same levels of federal aid to fight corona that other areas have. But, I think one thing that's gone on here is you saw Andrew Cuomo emerge as probably the second most high-profile figure to President Trump in the early days of this crisis. They were both hosting daily briefings, and many networks were airing Cuomo's as sort of an answer to the president, and a lot of members of the public latched onto that. Since then, the two of them have sort of circled each other nervously, almost like a pair of gunmen. They have both a lot to gain from each other and a lot of ways they could damage each other. When Cuomo has criticized the president, the White House has been quick to point to moments where Cuomo's praised the president as, almost an inoculation because Cuomo had emerged as such a high-profile critic. And then more recently, you've seen this spat over nursing homes, where Cuomo has been criticized for moving people from hospitals to nursing homes, where over 5,000 people died in New York. And he said, I was following the White House guidelines, as the White House tried to hit him with that. So it's this weird thing where, the president is in charge of the overall response and Cuomo leading the state that's been the hardest hit. They both can hurt each other very badly by taking shots at each other, and they also can offer each other unique bipartisan praise. So you've seen these visits with Cuomo and the president come at moments when they seem to be at odds, and the visits do seem to cool the tension.
Yeah, it has been fascinating to watch the evolving rhetoric and the evolving nature of their relationship as well. Finally, Hunter, on Tuesday, President Trump announced new changes to Medicare that aim to reduce the cost of insulin for senior citizens with diabetes. Let's listen to some of what he said.
I hope the seniors are going to remember it, because Biden is the one that put us into the jam because they didn't know what they were doing. They were incompetent. Soon, nearly half of all eligible Part D and Medicare Advantage prescription drug plans will offer this low-cost option. And when you say low-cost, you're really talking low-cost, giving seniors the freedom and choice to pick the plan that's right for them. Nothing will ever stop me from fulfilling my solemn duty to America's seniors. I'll use every power at my disposal to lower drug prices, and my administration will always protect Medicare and Social Security.
So, Hunter, obviously a very direct appeal to seniors during an election year. What is the president's strategy?
Well, I think we're seeing a theme here, right, Elaine, where in everything we've discussed, the response to coronavirus is just so infused with politics. In that case, as you pointed out, the president directly made it political. Somewhat preposterously, his senior counselor, Kellyanne Conway, on a call with reporters said, this wasn't about politics at all. This was just about prescription drugs. But I think it is pretty clear that this was an effort to appeal to senior citizens and attack Joe Biden in the process. This comes as the president's poll numbers overall, and particularly with seniors, are slipping. But it's also an area where Joe Biden has been vulnerable. In the primary, we saw Bernie Sanders and his team attack Joe Biden for past willingness to see Social Security curbed. It seems like President Trump might want to use a similar strategy as he's seeing his own numbers lead.
All right, Hunter Walker for us. Hunter, always appreciate your insight. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.